Right. Good evening and welcome everyone to a very special episode of the Leaders Talk series. On the speaker's hot seat today, we have our beloved Sir, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Sister Nivedita University, Professor Dhrubajyoti Chattopadhyay. It is an absolute honor for us to have Sir as a speaker on this webinar. I can speak on behalf of my team, in fact, all the participants that we have been eagerly waiting for this session. And we are very excited, sir, that we will finally get to hear you speak. Coronavirus disease originating in 2019 December in Wuhan has without a doubt presented us with unpredictable challenges. Well, it is being hailed largely as unprecedented, deadliest, incurable, and in some desperate YouTube channels even claim that it is apocalyptic. We will find out today how much of those claims are true. In tune with that, the topic of today's session is pandemic, Advent, history, challenges, and the days ahead. As the topic clearly suggests, Sir's talk today will almost be like a capsule lesson on the inception, progression, and culmination point of pandemic outbreaks that have wreaked havoc on the human civilization for centuries. We will also learn about the challenges that lie ahead and how we can stay safe and sound. Today's session is much needed as it will give us a clear picture and help us understand what is happening around us, what is happening to us. Two members of the SNU family, Sir does not need any introduction. Sir definitely is our beloved teacher. He has been the Vice Chancellor of our university from January this year. And he was also the founder, Vice Chancellor of Amity University, Kolkata from 2015 to 2019. Professor Chattopadhyay was the Dean, Faculty of Science at Calcutta University from 2003 to 2007. He was the Pro Vice Chancellor of the university from 2008 till 2015 and was also the Director at the Center of Research in Nanoscience and Nanotechnology at Calcutta University from 2007 till 2015. Professor Chattopadhyay has a research experience spanning more than 33 years. During his research career, he had visited numerous places in India and abroad. Sir had been to Roche Institute of Molecular Biology in New Jersey, USA, as a visiting postdoctoral fellow, as a visiting project scientist to the Cleveland Clinic Foundation, Cleveland, Ohio, and several other renowned institutes. He is also the recipient of numerous awards, accolades, and distinctions, which include the Young Scientist Award in 1989, member of Guho Research Conference in 1992, Professor Umakant Sinha Memorial Award in 1992. The list is endless. And he was the Fellow of Indian Academy of Sciences in 2004, Fellow of West Bengal Academy of Science and Technology in 2006, to name a few. Dr. Chattopadhyay has lifetime memberships in various organizations and scientific associations like Indian Science Congress Association, member of the Asiatic Society, member of Biotechnology Society, member of Virological Society, and so on. Above all this, he is our beloved professor. He's a wonderful teacher. He's been teaching for more than 35 years, during which he has assisted a lot of PhD candidates and who successfully, under his able guidance, has brought fame and glory to themselves as well as to the country. Professor Chattopadhyay's talks, his ideas on the ongoing crisis from the perspective of a virologist is being covered in various media outlets. Today, we will get to hear him speak exclusively for us. I'm sure all of you in the audience will have a lot of questions. Please leave your questions in the chat box. We will also be streaming live on YouTube. So participants who are joining us over YouTube can also leave their questions in the channel's chat box and comment section. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for being there with us. Thank you so much for agreeing to speak in this session today. We will soon start the session, but I would request Ms. Ina Bose, our director, to give her opening remarks. Ma'am.
Thank you, Indila. Thank you so much. Sir, it's not only me, my team, or the participants here, which covers around 300, but it's probably a large community, including the families, including all our associates. We are anxiously waiting to hear from you. We are in a most, I would say, turmoil mental state that we are going through for the last now almost 4 months, I would say. And the only answer, the only solution that we are looking for is an advice from a father figure like you. Sir, we really want to know about this COVID-19, the past, present, future from you. I will not take much of the participants' time, and I don't want to be standing in between you and your listeners. So it's you now, sir. The house is yours.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much, madam. And I like to thank your team and thank Indrila also for actually going through my biodata. Anyway, I love to tell everybody that I want to be a good human being first, whatever to. But I'm trying to, but I don't know how far I can go towards that. So when Madam Bush actually told me that you have to give a webinar, I was thinking that how I could make this webinar a little bit different from the series of webinars I'm given in the scientific world to the students and others. But let me try to actually share my experience after March 22nd. March 22nd, the lockdown announced. The lockdown announced under a very, very critical situation by the government of India. Everything got closed and we have to stay at home. Now you understand that it's so difficult actually to stay at home and go through everything. So I was thinking that what should I do? You know what I started doing? I started reading books. And what books? The books related to the different epidemics throughout the history of humanity. The world history has actually looked up on several different epidemics, pandemics, and everything. And the books written on them, there are several books on that. And really, I think that's the best thing I could actually get to know in this particular period of time. So Vendrila, can I have my first slide, please? Which is going to show all the different types of books I have gone through. Yes, you can see a very, very, very dreadful, the influenza pandemic of 1918, almost 102 years back. This book is really a very interesting book. Pandemic, the book on Ebola, the vaccine race. Don't you think that what we are looking at right now is another vaccine race? The fatal fever, the pandemic century, all the different books which I have read during this period. And I came to know, I will try to actually give a gist of those things at the very beginning of my lecture. Next slide. And that's why I thought, next slide, please. That's why I thought that my topic is going to be giving you some sort of history of the pandemics. If you look at this particular slide, which starts from the Antonine Plague, which is actually at that period of time, 165 to 180, 5 million people died. Then plague of Justinian, Japanese smallpox, Black Death, bubonic plague, smallpox, 17th century Great Plague, 18th century Great Plague. So every century, they have one after another. The cholera, the third plague, the yellow fever, and remember this yellow fever. Then HIV AIDS we could see. And if you look at recently, in the recent past, the Asian flu, the Hong Kong flu, the MERS, the SARS, the Ebola, the swine flu, and the latest one is the COVID-19 started in 2019. So throughout history, as humans spread across the world, infectious diseases have been a constant companion. Even in this modern era, outbreaks are nearly constant. And here are some of the history's most deadly pandemic. Next slide. And if you look at this death toll, you can see that the number of people died during all this, and where from this particular thing, bubonic plague, originated in rats, spread to human by infected cells. The outbreak wiped out 30 to 50% of European population. The smallpox, it killed an estimated 90% of Native Americans. In Europe also, 0.4 million people killed by smallpox annually. And till the death, the vaccine for smallpox was actually developed by the scientists. We could see that. But you know, the smallpox is almost eradicated. Then if we look at what is actually what we could find in case of all the different things in WHO, the WHO officially declared COVID-19 a pandemic on March 11. Next slide, please. So this is the death toll, highest to lowest. And March 11, 2020 is actually the forecast of the impact of COVID-19 by WHO, which was very difficult for them. But they said the disease is new to medicine and data is still coming. So people are actually looking at it from that particular angle, a new virus causing the massive havoc throughout the world. Next slide. So if we just plot the approximate deaths versus the deadliest pandemics in human history, you can compare that and you can see that the Black Death is actually the most, where you can see a huge number of deaths. And before that, you can see the Spanish flu in 1918, HIV AIDS, and the others. But these particular numbers are actually, I'm not sure that COVID-19, where it's going to end. So whether we can tell that with respect to the number of deaths, it is going to be the deadliest pandemics in human history. Next slide. Next slide. So here I'm just trying to show you that the earliest recorded pandemic is actually the one which I find it out that happened during the Peloponnesian War. After the disease passed through Libya, Ethiopia, Egypt, it crossed the Athenian walls as the Spartans led siege. As much as 2/3 of the population died. The symptoms included fever, thirst, bloody throat, tongue, red skin, lesions. And you know that when the disease Ebola first appeared in 1996, an epidemiologist from San Diego, he proposed the idea in a paper published in the journal Emerging Infectious Disease that this plague of Athens may be the one which is actually suspected to have been typhoid fever. And the disease was perhaps Ebola first. Next slide, please. And then, if you can see after this 165 AD, the Antonine Plague, where we said possibly an earliest appearance of smallpox that began with the Huns. The Huns infected the Germans, who passed it to the Romans. So this is what I'm saying, that these are all traveling across the world and then returning troops spread it through the Roman Empire. At the height of the Antonine Plague, up to 3,000 ancient Romans dropped dead every single day. And the plague continued until about 180 AD, claiming one of the emperor also. Next slide, please. And when it goes on to the next one, next slide. In 250 AD, the Cyprian plague, the Christian bishop of Carthage, they entailed diarrhea, vomiting, throat ulcers, fever, gangrenous hands and feet. The city dwellers fled to the country to escape infection. Possibly starting in Ethiopia, it passed through Northern Africa, Rome, Egypt. And there were reckoning outbreaks over the next 3 centuries. It hit Britain and obstructed defense efforts against the Picts and the Scots, causing the British to seek help from the Saxons, who would soon control the island. The next slide. Next slide, please. So Albert Camus, in the book Plague, he said the plague was posting sentries at the gates and turning away ships bound for Oran. And the 3 of the deadliest pandemics in recorded history were caused by a single bacterium, Yersinia pestis, which causes a fatal infection known as the bubonic plague. Next. Next. Now, in the Justinian plague, which appeared in Egypt in 541 AD, the plague changed the course of empires while Emperor Justinian's plans to bring the Roman Empire back together and causing massive economic struggle. It is believed to be the first significant appearance of the bubonic plague, which features enlarged lymphatic gland. While antibiotics are available to the Black Death, according to the World Health Organization, but a large number of people actually died. Next. The reckoning of the bubonic plague over the next 2 centuries eventually killed about 50 million people, at 26% of the world population, responsible for the death of 1/3 of the world population. The second large outbreak of the bubonic plague possibly started in Asia and moved west in caravans, entering through Sicily. When plague sufferers arrived in the port of Messina, it spread throughout Europe. England and France were so incapacitated by the plague that the countries called a truce to their war. I just quote the Giovanni Boccaccio's quotation, to quote, "In this sore affliction and misery of our city, the reverend authority of the laws, both human and divine, was all in a manner dissolved and fallen into decay. Fall the ministers and executors thereof, who like other men were all either dead or sick or else left so destitute of followers that they are unable to actually. So everyone had license to do whatever pleased him." Next slide. In 1665, the Great Plague of London is actually the one where the human death tolls mounted and mass graves appeared. Hundreds of thousands of cats and dogs were slaughtered as the possible cause, and the disease spread through ports along the Thames. The worst of the outbreak tapered off in the fall of 1666, and around the same time as another destructive event called the Great Fire of London. Now, to quote, and here I must observe also that the plague, as I suppose all distempers do, operated in a different manner on differing constitutions. Some were immediately overwhelmed with it, and it came to violent fevers, vomiting. It was found that Daniel Defoe, a journal of the plague year written by Citizen, who continued all the while in London. Next. So at that time, if you look at, we are talking about quarantine, quarantine, quarantine now. You know where from it came? After its first occurrence, the plague never really went away. And when it returned 800 years later, it killed with reckless abandon. The Black Death, which hit Europe in 1347, claimed an astonishing 200 million lives in just 4 years. Remember, it there for 4 years. As for how to stop the disease, people still had no scientific understanding of contagion, but they know that it had something to do with proximity. That's why the forward-thinking officials in the Venetian-controlled port city of Ragusa decided to keep newly arrived sailors in isolation until they could prove they were not sick. At first, sailors were held on their ships for 30 days, which became known as Venetian law as a Trentino. As the time went on, the Venetians increased the forced isolation to 40 days or a quarantino, the origin of the word quarantine and the start of its practice in the Western world. So that's how this word quarantine been coined to in that particular period of time. So 40 days of forced isolation. The third plague antibody, yes, next slide, it's all right. 1855. It starts in China and moved to India and Hong Kong. And the bubonic plague claimed 15 million victims. Initially spread of fleas during a mining boom in Yunnan, the plague is considered a factor in the Perth Rebellion and Taiping Rebellion. India faced the most substantial casualties, and the epidemic was used as an excuse for repressive policies that sparked some revolt against the British. The pandemic was considered active until 1860, when cases dropped below a couple hundred. So 1855, the third plague. Next slide. Next slide. Can I have, yeah. Then another era comes with the cholera pandemic. There are 7 cholera pandemics over the next 150 years. And the wave of the small intestine infection originated in Russia, where 1 million people died. And then the reach of the British Empire and its navy spread cholera to Spain, Africa, Indonesia, China, Japan, Italy, Germany, America, where it killed 150,000 people. A vaccine was created in 1885, but pandemics continued. You know, the cartoon says, no, the cartoon said, the silent highway, man, your money or your life. An English caricature of the 19th century. You have seen the polluted river, Thames amid sewage and dead rats. Next slide. Next slide. Then in 1875, the Fiji measles pandemic is another one. You know, the royal party visited Australia as a gift from Queen Victoria. Arriving during a measles outbreak, the royal party brought the disease back to their island, and it was spread further by the tribal heads and police who met with them upon their return. Spreading quickly, the island was littered with corpses that were scavenged by wild animals, and entire villages died and were burned down, sometimes with the sick trapped inside the fires. 1/3 of Fiji's population died. Next slide. Then, whatever we're talking about, almost a century back, 102 years back, 1918, we call it the time for Spanish flu when 50 million dead. When the flu hit, it's not the Spanish flu means originated in Spain. When the flu hit, doctors and scientists were unsure what caused it and how to treat it. Unlike today, there were no effective vaccines or antivirals drugs that treat the flu. You know, the first licensed flu vaccine appeared in America in 1940s. But even now, we cannot say that we have flu vaccines. We have to change continuously. COVID-19 renews memories of Spanish flu or the forgotten pandemic. Spanish flu means forgotten pandemic, so named because its spread was overshadowed by the deadliness of World War I and covered up by news blackouts and poor record keeping. Next slide. Next slide. So these are some pictures. Don't you think the similar pictures you are looking at right now? The complicating matters was the fact that World War I had left parts of America with a shortage of physicians and other health workers. And now you can hear the USA is suffering from COVID-19 because of the shortage of physicians and health workers. And of the available medical personnel in the USA, many came down with the flu themselves. Now, a large number of medical doctors are actually down with COVID-19. See this particular next picture. Additionally, hospitals in some areas were so overloaded with flu patients that schools, private homes, other buildings had to be converted into makeshift hospitals, some of which were staffed by medical students. The same picture, the history repeats. Can't you see the similar things right now? You can see the similar way of actually taking number of even hotels also now for making the makeshift hospitals. Next. Next. And here you can see the officials in some communities imposed quarantines, ordered citizens to wear masks 100 years back, and shut down public places, including schools, churches, theaters. People were advised to avoid shaking hands and to stay indoors. Libraries put a halt on lending books, and regulations were passed banning spitting. Spit fears death. You can see all these things in this particular public notice published on November 7th, 1918. Notice here were given in order to prevent the spread of Spanish influenza. All schools, public and private, churches, theaters, moving picture hall, pool, rooms, and other places of amusement and large meetings are also closed with further notice issued by the mayor. All public gatherings consisting of 10 or more are prohibited. History repeats itself. The same notice you can see right now. It's all over, and the same picture is there right now. Don't you think so? Next slide. So in century of pandemics, by the summer of 1919, the flu pandemic came to an end as those that were infected either died or developed immunity. Almost 90 years later, in 2008, researchers announced that discovered what made the 1980 flu so deadly. A group of 3 genes enabled the virus to weaken a victim's bronchial tubes and lungs and cleared the way for bacterial pneumonia. Since 1918, there have been several other influenza pandemics, although none as so deadly. Here is the thing what I'm showing as a different flu, different influenza. And recently you heard about swine flu, you heard about this Ebola, Hong Kong flu, Asian flu, and others. Next. Next slide. So this 1957 Asian flu, starting in Hong Kong, spreading throughout China and then into the United States, the Asian flu became widespread in England, and over 6 months, 14,000 people died. A second wave followed in early 1958, causing an estimated total of about 1.1 million deaths globally, with 116,000 deaths in the United States alone. But this time we have more. A vaccine was developed effectively containing the pandemic. This is a picture, a nurse at the hospital in New York, the first Asian flu vaccine shot to be administered in the New York City. And you can see now the Oxford one also been tried on somebody. That picture is also viral now. Next. 2003, SARS. The first identified in 2003 after several months of cases, severe acute respiratory syndrome is believed to have possibly started with bats, spread to cats and then to humans in China followed by 26 other countries, infecting around 9,000 people with 774 deaths. SARS is characterized by respiratory problem, dry cough, fever, head and body aches, and is spread through respiratory droplets from coughs and sneezes. Quarantine efforts proved effective, and by July, the virus was contained and has not reappeared since China was criticized for trying to suppress the information. SARS was seen by global health professionals as a wake-up call to improve outbreak response, and lessons from the pandemic were used to keep diseases like H1N1, Ebola, as well as Zika under control. Next. Now, I want to actually define one term, what we call right now RO, basic reproduction number of diseases. This RO is a measure of how many people each sick person will infect on average. If you look at the Mars, the ratio is 0.8. That means if one person is infected in the population, it can infect less than 1%. In case of influenza, it is 1.5. In case of Ebola, it is 2. In case of COVID-19, is 2.5. SARS, 3.5. Mumps, 4.5. Rubella, 6. And if you look at measles, it's very high. It's 16. So RO is very high for measles, mumps, others, rubella. But it is not so high in case of COVID-19. It's 2.5 and less than the SARS, that is the first one. The smallpox is around 6. Next. Next slide. So now I come back to the discussion on the coronavirus. The discovery of the first human virus, if you remember, I mentioned to you about the yellow fever virus, 1901 to 1928, it was there. That is the first virus which been discovered for causing the fever. Discovery of the first coronavirus is the avian infectious bronchitis virus in 1937. But the first human coronavirus, it looks like in 1961, a strain B814. The strain is currently lost. Next. Next. The first person to identify of the coronavirus called 229E, Dorothy Hamre, a virologist and infectious disease researcher at the University of Chicago Department of Medicine in 1966. And Jules Almeida, working at Britain's Common Cold Research Unit in Salisbury, produced the first image of the virus. If you look at the electron microscopic viral image, you can see out of the circle, a lot of things are coming up, which just looks like a crown. And from there, the name corona. You know that so far, there are 7 different coronavirus species exist today. And the list is given below. Next slide. Next slide. So the human coronavirus looks like this. It's got the spike protein, which actually makes the appearance like a corona. Then the M protein, the envelope, it's an RNA virus. It contains the RNA and the E protein. And you know the spike protein or the N protein, this protein is glycosylated, that is N-terminal. The M protein is the most abundant and the E protein is also there, which actually is involved in ion channel activity. It belongs to the members of the beta coronavirus group. Next slide, please. So this is a timeline for the emergence of the human coronavirus. And if you look at it, you can see that at different times, this is actually coming, and at different times, it causes these particular diseases. In the next slide. Next slide. So here, I just want to give you some idea about the contrast between the present, why we call it the new, the Wuhan coronavirus originated from Wuhan, Middle East respiratory syndrome virus, the severe acute respiratory syndrome virus, and the common cold caused by coronavirus. Normally, the cold is caused by coronavirus, which we are having a number of times. So the first reported in Wuhan, this particular in December 2019, and it's likely from touching and eating an infected as yet unidentified animal, human to human transmission starts to occur. And there are large number of things which is going on and on and on. The MERS virus, which started in Saudi Arabia, and then from the infected camels, and the all cases linked to the Arabian Peninsula. But SARS 2002 also appeared first in southern China, and it's been believed to have spread from the bats. Now, this SARS-CoV-2 was found to be originated from bats, but when people actually looked at its sequences, there is quite a bit of long sequence matching. It's with another virus from pangolin. So people are right now debating on whether pangolins are the intermediates. Next slide. So this is a comparative study between the SARS-CoV and SARS-CoV-2. They're only 80% identical, but both have originated in bats. And one thing is very important, that COVID, that is 2002 one, is more aggressive and lethal. And the SARS-CoV-2, it spreads faster, sometimes with hidden symptoms, that's why we call asymptomatic, allowing each infected person to infect several others. And the prevention of transmission is almost same for that. Though the SARS-CoV has got a fatality rate of 9.6%, the COVID-2 has got a fatality rate much less. Next. Next one. Now, when a person gets infected with this virus, the severity of illness, along with the time, if you look at, there is a stage 1, what we call as an early infection. Then in the stage 2, we can see that there is a pulmonary phase. And the second half of the phase 2, we have the host inflammatory response started. And this inflammatory response increases to give an hyperinflammation phase at stage 3. So in the stage 1, we just see the mild constitutional symptoms, fever, dry cough, diarrhea, headache, etc. But in the stage 2, it starts with the shortness of breath, hypoxia. But in the third stage, we call it cardiac failure can take place. There is elevated inflammatory markers, and that's why it is dangerous. The potential therapies are all people are trying with different types of things. People are also trying at the stage 3 to reduce immune suppression to get the less hyperinflammation phase with corticosteroids or steroids, IL-6 inhibitors, and others. Next slide. Now, the COVID-19, the big picture, if you look at, it says, where do common virus comes from, COVID-19? It's from bats. How does a virus spread? Physical closeness to infected people and touching infected surface. What is the future of this pandemics? It could disappear like SARS or become endemic. This is another thing. It may remain as an endemic for the next 2 years. Scientists are trying to develop the vaccines. And what should I do? You can see that many countries have reduced the spread of infection with some very simple measures by keeping the physical distancing, washing hands often with soap, and wearing the mask. So these 3 actually are what should I do? Next slide. And coronavirus is part of a large family of viruses, as I mentioned to you already. So as I'm mentioning that maintain a distance of at least 1 meter with others, avoid mass gatherings, crowded places like movies, gym, religious places, and work from home and avoid non-essential travel. Now, when a person with COVID-19 sneezes or coughs, each droplets with virus can infect a person nearby, or it can land on a nearby surface where it can stay for 3 days. So that's why touching the surfaces, and why we have to wash our hands, because unknowingly we can actually get this particular infection. And inside the body, the virus attacks and enters human cells through our nostrils, to the eye, to the mouth. Virus multiplies inside the cell, kills the human cell, it entered and spreads to infect the cell. And how actually it goes into the inside cell? I mentioned about in the spike protein. There is a receptor on some cells, which is known as the ACE2 receptor, which acts as a receptor which actually allows the virus to go inside. And the number of receptors on the lung cell alveoli is very high. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide, please. There are several diagnostics right now, and every day new diagnostic states are coming up. The standard states are actually using the RNA testing of respiratory secretions using nasopharyngeal swab. Though it is possible to test other samples, the test usually has real-time PCR, which detects the presence of the viral RNA fragments. That is a molecular test. Then it actually indicates the current infection. You can get it from the mucous saliva by the swab techniques, and it detects the genetic material of the virus, and the results takes around 4 to 6 hours, sometimes 24 hours also. There is another way, imaging, a CT scan of the chest of a person with COVID-19. It shows light patches in the lungs. Characteristic imaging features on chest radiographs and computed tomography of people who are symptomatic include asymmetric peripheral ground glass opacities without pleural infusions. But once the infection is there, the antibody with our own defense system starts to develop. And so rapid antibody test is another way to test that whether you are infected already, though it happens after 10 to 14 days of infection with the immunoglobulin G and M. Now the serology, it actually after infection, blood or serum you have to take as a sample from the prick on finger, and you have to detect the antibodies in the blood, but it is very rapid. Within 30 minutes you can get the result. Next. Next one. Now the one which is a hidden risk, asymptomatic transmission. So if we consider subject A has COVID-19 infection, no symptoms. Why? You know, the person was infected when he is in the phase 1, his immune system is so strong that it combats with the virus, and it keeps the virus load so low that it cannot go to the stage 2, stage 3. And this subject may have no symptom or mild symptoms. So this person at home is in contact with another person, say B. If he goes to train, he can meet many other person. In the work, he could make close and nearby persons. And then what happens, come back at home again. So this is actually what we can see what happens in the day 1. And in the day 2, when fever starts in A, this report symptoms, request home test. And if you find you are positive COVID-19, you can understand why all the persons in the family or you met in the train or in the work, everybody has to be tested. So the asymptomatic transmission is a hidden risk. Next. So the other features, what we can say, that 2 very important things. One, managing the stress while working from home. And there are several ways of doing that. Accept that you may not be as productive as always. Set realistic goals and reward yourself. Create boundaries and minimize distraction. Set work hours and stick to them. And priorities, prioritize your well-being. And connect with your colleagues also. And also another very important thing that you have to manage the stress as well as deal with the pandemic anxiety. You have to do simple relaxation technique. You have to understand, don't let the pandemic becomes a topic of every conversation. You disengage every once in a while. Look at the TV at the very beginning, you can see all the time it started with COVID. Now, definitely we have something else is coming up. Take a break from the news and social media. Plan for things that you can control and reach out and connect with others. Sharing your fear with others who can help, and try to maintain the physical distancing protocols very seriously. Next. Next slide. Now, the potential therapeutic approaches so far, all the scientists are trying to do is actually to make antibodies to spike resulting from vaccination or adoptive transfer block virus binding to ACE2. The second method is finding out some protease inhibitors, which are actually activate the spike protein to interact with the receptor. The third is there are virus-specific effector CD8 plus T cells arising from vaccination recognize the infected cells. In today's newspaper, you must have seen that antibodies longevity in our system may not be too long, but the T follicular cells will be much more stable in our system. Now, cytotoxic granules will be secreted, and this T cytotoxic cells will kill the virus particles. And the fourth one is a pro-inflammatory cytokines, which can be neutralized through the transfer of blocking antibodies. So these are the different ways that people are trying to develop the potential therapeutics. Next slide. And the rapidly emerging data leading to the advanced understanding of how SARS-CoV-2 takes over the host cell, you will be astonished to know that in 2020, almost 10,000 journal articles on SARS-CoV-2. So in this short period of time, a lot of collaborative research are going on. There are some articles which gives wrong, they are retracted, but there are a huge number of researches going on. This is just to mention that all over the world, people are trying hard. Next slide. And there are different types of antibodies right now being developed. Development of the inactivated vaccine candidate is also there. Next slide. Next slide. So in general, people are trying to do the blood plasma transfers, but they are only for the critically ill patients. And for critically ill patients, this passive immunization, which is a transfer or transfusion of potential protective antibodies from someone who has been infected and recovered from COVID-19. We call it convalescent sera. It's being started to use, and people are actually using it, but it has to be done in a very... Next slide. The remdesivir is one of the pro-drug, which also right now people are talking about. It slows down the infection. So if it slows down the infection in the clinical stage 1, you can really treat the patient with things, and they may not develop the stage 2 or stage 3. The next one. The vaccine. The first human trial, the vaccine announced in April. And you know that all of the people are right now looking at the Monday result in Oxford. The first human trial in Europe had started. The pharmaceutical giant Sanofi, GSK, Australian scientists, Chinese scientists, and even the biotechnology departments in India from ICMR and from the Bharat Biotech, they are devising vaccines. Serum Institute is coming with a vaccine against pneumonia. You know, that has already been drug approved. And that's a different story. This is just to show that India has got all the potentials for manufacturing vaccines. Next. Next. This co-vaccine, which is going to be in the literature all the time about coming on 15th August, 15th August. I'm not sure that 15th August is going to be about, because vaccines always takes a lot of time for proving its efficacy. But co-vaccine with Bharat Biotech gets approval of BCGI for phase 1-2 clinical trials, found quite positive. And Vaxxer announced its core oral COVID-19 vaccine candidate, which is selected for investigation in non-human primates and showed very nice result. And it was looked at in January 2021, it may come out. Next. Next one. And this is the one, if you remember, that the nurse who has taken the first one, similarly an mRNA vaccine against SARS-CoV-2, the preliminary report which came out in the New England Journal, Moderna's SARS-CoV-2 vaccine first phase clinical trial produced antibodies in all patients with no major side effects. And if you have antibodies within you, the virus, when enters, will be destroyed by that antibodies. It cannot carry on its infection. We are all looking forward to that also. Next one. Next slide. So what's at risk? There is an 18-month view of a post-COVID world. You can see so many different areas are going to be affected. Will leave lasting impacts on everything: economic, societal, geopolitical, technology, environmental, everywhere. Next slide. Next slide. And you can see the greatest concern for the world is that there are top 31 risks. And this is a WEF survey of 347 risk analysis. And you can see the prolonged global recession is the highest risk, with high unemployment, another disease outbreak, weakening major economics, industrials fail to recover, more bankruptcies, more restricted travel, emerging market collapse, geopolitical exploitation of COVID-19 crisis, weakened social security, worsened humanitarian crisis, remote working, and all these things. And these are going on and on and on. Next slide. Next slide. So I want to repeat what Rabindranath Tagore mentioned in his novel Choturanga through one of the character, Bihari. It is better not to go to the medical person rather than to take all the precautions so that you don't have to go. So prevention is better than cure. So world, read books, play video games, watch movies, play with your kids, draw, think, write, cook, sleep. You do whatever you want to do, stay at home. It has never been easier to save lives. So only by staying home, save lives. Take all the precautions when you will go out. Keep a safe distance, wash hands often, cover your cough. Sick, call ahead. Help to stop coronavirus. Please try to make your neighbor, nearby people also to aware about this, so that really they use masks, so that they use this hand wash seriously. Next one. And the masks reduce the risk of this airborne transmission in a very big way. If you look at the particle size, the infected asymptomatic to the healthy, the maximum exposure, and thereby you can get that if you have the mask, you can actually have the minimum or symptomatic, you will have a minimum exposure. So everyone we should use, whether healthy or asymptomatic, we should use the mask. Next. We have to actually fight the COVID stigma, racial stigma, blaming a particular community for the current situation, violence against the health workers, and affected individuals are facing social stigma. You came to know somebody in your neighborhood, get immediately everybody said, oh, no, avoid them, throw them out. No, it's not possible. We'll not allow the people to come back from hospital into this area. All these type of things are going on. But being kind to the affected individuals, depend on facts and not rumors. Spread awareness regarding do's and don'ts as endorsed by our health workers, and providing the mental health care are something which will help to fight the COVID stigma. Next slide. So I'm almost at the end. So preparing for a world with and after COVID-19. Every problem makes us creative. Every challenge offers opportunity. Let us be resourceful and cater to the demands of humanity. Let we have all these mantras and try whatever we are, to do as much as possible to really fight with the war against COVID-19. Next slide. So this is just, I want to show another one by the New York Telephone Company. Then when in quarantine, people who are in quarantine are not isolated if they have a Bell telephone. The Bell service brings cheer and encouragement to the sick and is of value in countless other ways. Friends, whether close at hand or far away, can be easily reached because Bell service is universal. So that's actually happened. We were talking about this a number of years back. And now we have BSNL, Jio, Airtel, Vodafone, all these things are there. So keep in contact with your friends. Use hand sanitizer, wear face mask, and let us drive away the COVID-19 by taking precautions until and unless we are there. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patient hearing. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. So what I feel is that the participants are awestruck, or I don't know whether they are frightfully trying to digest your talk, because I haven't received a single question. They have become dumbfounded.
Yeah.
But I have a question, sir.
Same here, ma'am. I too, if with your permission. Ma'am, you first, you started.
Okay, let me ask sir, my question first. But Oindila, just keep an eye on the chat box if there are any questions in the meantime. Sir, what is India's situation in comparison to the global condition? How safe or how at danger are we?
See, the decision of lockdown at that particular phase in March was very important because we are not prepared at all. So for preparing ourselves, we need some time. And that actually lessens this lockdown, the lowering the rate of infection because it's highly contagious. And that's why you can see in the first period, for a long period of time, we didn't have quite a number of infection. But you know that lockdown cannot be continued for a long period of time. In the meantime, the infrastructure and other things tried to be developed. And then now when it is open to unlocked, then you can find that it is the obvious thing that there will be more infection. And we have to understand whatever we have learned, we started to unlearn. You can see the people are not wearing masks. And they said, oh, what happened? I'm not infected. It's okay. I'm asymptomatic. But everybody is actually in danger, even if you're asymptomatic or symptomatic. So we have to actually prepare ourselves for the next many months so that things could be normalized slowly. It's a new normal situation we have to face, but we have to understand that. So India's condition, I think it's not too bad. And in the meantime, we are expecting some repurposed drugs will come, as well as some preliminary vaccines are going to be there, which can lessen and at least be tried to lower the infection.
So my next question is, will the vaccine or the drugs differ from Indian condition and the global condition?
No. It's a universal, it's a worldwide one. But it was found that different types of strains are there actually, which are actually prevailing. And sometimes because of that, there are some changes in the efficacy of that. But these particular drugs, which we are looking at right now, repurposed drugs, we are trying to actually attack the viral machinery, which are less chance of getting changed over the time. And so it looks like it will be all over.
So there is a genetic difference between the
Yeah,
different
the
regions of the
strengths.
world.
Yeah,
So that
exactly.
will not affect the treatment.
Yeah, but that's how actually the planning is going on. That how actually we can cover up that thing.
Okay.
So we
Indira,
have
your question?
questions. Yes, no. First, we have few questions from the participants. Sir, I'll address. I'll ask those. Biton Chakraborty, he's asking, though the R factor of COVID is much lower than MERS, SARS, and all, why is the number of affected people and deaths much higher in COVID?
Yeah. So you know that when we are talking about much higher, with respect to what? It's not with respect to the total population. If you look at the total world population with the number of deaths, you can see it is not high. A total population versus the death numbers. We are talking about number of people infected that particular number versus the death. And even infected number is also not available to us. There are a lot of people who have not tested but are infected. So among the total number, we cannot get the actual number of percentage of death. And the people whom we are looking at, it is actually the one who have other different types of ailments like diabetes, like some kidney disorders, high sugar, high pressure, many other things are there, and they are actually more susceptible. And thereby we can see that these are the situations which are making them more infectious, and among the persons who are going to the hospital, they are actually number of death is higher. But still you can see the percentile is still less than 5%.
So we have another question from Fatima. In case a person is COVID positive, after how many days interval should he get tested next?
See, once a person tested positive for COVID-19, in another 3 days, 7 days, and 10 days.
So this is Dr. Bishwanath Chaudhary. He's asking, sir, don't you think that lockdown slows down immunity as we are not exposed to any foreign particle?
No, the lockdown period, we always say that try to have nutritious food, which is going to actually boost your immunity.
So, and well, another question from Professor Bhodro, Professor Bula Bhodro. If the vaccine is there, what would be the access scenario, especially in a country like India?
Yeah.
I can think of.
So that is one of the things which you can see a little bit of positive direction, because Indian vaccine companies, Serum Institute of India, Bharat Biotech, everybody right now develop the manufacturing capacity to a very high rate. So what is actually the Indian vaccine manufacturers are going to try, that once a vaccine will come, so that it could be available, its accessibility should be high. So, but regarding the foreign companies which are coming with the vaccines, you know that already politics started about who will get it, who will not get it. So if Indian people actually started manufacturing it, it will be accessible to a much larger number of people.
Priyanka Bhomik, next question. How much effective COVID-19 is for the future of young generation, especially students?
What?
I don't know what the question means.
Can you repeat the question?
Well, she wrote, Priyanka
Young
Bhomik, how
generation.
much effective COVID-19 is for the future of young generation.
Okay.
What can we take back?
Yeah, so you know that this particular COVID-19, as I started with, is actually helping us to learn a lot of things. So this particular challenge gives us a lot of opportunities. And the opportunities is the new teaching pedagogy, which is very important right now, which is so difficult to implement, is start to implement. We are talking about the availability of internet, higher bandwidth throughout the country to the remotest part. Now the government realized and they started to discuss about how to do that and spend money on that. The strengthening of our medical infrastructure, you can see there are a lot of things which always we try to depend on other countries and get it from them. Now we started manufacturing many of those things. In this short period of time, regarding the testing kits, there are so many indigenous testing kits are actually being developed. All these things are positive, and this is definitely going to have an impact on the young generation.
So there are a few questions on YouTube. Indila, let me take 2 questions from the YouTube first.
Yeah.
One, Mr. Prahlad Kumar Kaur, he has written, what about the myth of air transmission?
See, one of the, I think, yeah, you were right. You said the myth, yeah, because, you know, air transmission means, if you remember the slide I have shown, where I said that if somebody sneezes or coughs and other things, these particles actually can within 1 meter, if there is another person, he may or may not, that person may receive it or not, or it may land on a surface, and on the surface it stays for a longer period of time. So always this particular droplets which are coming out through the coughs, sneezes and others, these are actually mixed aerosol particles which are in the air and can go. So that is what we call as a air transmission. But you know that a lot of people thought airborne means it actually generates in air. That's not right. It is actually can stay in the air and pass on in the form of aerosol from one person to another person, from on the surface to other person.
Sir, on that note, sir, for the surface, is there any difference, like on plastic surface, how long can this virus survive? On a
Yeah,
metal surface, are there any differences?
yeah, differences here. On the metal surface, it stays a longer period of time. On the plastic surface, it is less time. And based on that basis, some sort of paints are already being developed, which you can put it on the surface, and that will actually have a negative charge on it. So the virus itself is negative, so that they cannot actually land on the surface itself.
So, sir, as you said, the problem makes us more creative and innovative.
Yes.
There's another question on YouTube. What is herd immunity?
Yeah, herd immunity means that in a population, if you remember one of the slides I mentioned earlier, that particular flu is being gone because of the whole population either dead or they become immune. So that is what we call as a herd immunity. That means the population who are surviving, everybody has got that antibody. But that herd immunity is only possible when the population is not so high. If you think about Indian population, that out of 134 crores, you have to get 80% of the people to be infected. And so number of infected people will be so high. Out of that, the people who have to go to a hospital, if that is 5% of them, then it is also too high. And if you calculate it, almost like 2 crore, 3 crore numbers. So in case of the countries like us, we cannot think about herd immunity. It's really not possible. Naturally, if it happens, it will go on because it will stay here for a longer period of time. And during that period, we will start having the immunity against this virus.
So, Chitrita and Bithon Chakraborty, all of them are asking whether if it's totally cured at a point of time, will it come back again?
Yeah.
Are there possibilities?
Yes, there are a lot of possibilities of coming back again. But you know that in the second time, this particular thing is going to be either a completely new strain of virus or a virus which is less infectious.
Farhat Naz, sir, in your presentation, am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah. In your presentation, you have shown different plagues that humans faced over the years. Can we say that we have not learned from history what to do suddenly, such as providing health facilities during a pandemic situation?
I have to tell that it's reality. We haven't learned. You know that 1918, after that, there is a recommendation given that we have to do this. Then in SARS-CoV-2, there is a huge recommendation given by WHO. But what happened after that? We have recommendation, but not implementation.
So most vaccines, this is Shom Subro Thakur, most vaccines that are under study are mostly protein vaccine, while less amount of work are being done to develop RNA and DNA vaccine.
Yeah, but the Oxford vaccine is a messenger RNA one, as well as the DNA vaccine, which is Gydus cadila, has been developed, is a DNA vaccine one. So no, it's going on. But you know that the successful candidates are less in case of the nucleic acid vaccines.
So this is Shivam Kumar Gupta. In your opinion, after this pandemic comes to a close, however long that may be, what should be the first step we as a global community we can take so that we are better prepared for the next pandemic?
Yeah, so the Japanese said it's in a very nice way. You know that the Japanese people, if you look, go to Japan, you can see that many of the people, whenever they have a little bit of cough or things, in the train or anywhere, they use a mask. They use washing the hands, and they never actually do the handshake. They used to do nodding, and so keeping a distance between the people. So all these practices are very important for actually transmitting the disease from one person to another. So we have to actually understand that, and we have to start doing that. Our namaskar is also a good way of actually doing things, recognizing others.
So we have one question from Professor Rajat Pal. He sent me in WhatsApp. We are expecting to have vaccine 15th of August. Being a microbiologist, I think it is not possible to make vaccine so quickly. The reports are also not supporting that. And should we wait for vaccine, or will we go any other precautious measure? Will we take any other precautious measure? Your suggestion.
My slides showed you that prevention is better than cure. Don't wait for vaccines. Don't wait for the antivirals. The virus is there, and nobody actually developed antivirals for such a long period of time. So don't wait for them. Because it's in case of this particular viral diseases, I used to listen from my grandmas and others. If we take medicine 7 days, if we don't take medicines 1 week. So that's a thing, what experienced people always said. So it's better to take the precaution. But definitely, being in the science, being the era of technology, we all look forward. The way the SARS-CoV-1, that is the SARS virus, has been actually cheated and very effective, within 2 years, it's gone. Ebola is also very effectively been removed. So we will hope that we're soon going to have this particular vaccine. A new trend of vaccine development also started. And all these things are very, very important. We are very hopeful that 15th August may not be, but definitely during this year, we are going to have good vaccine candidates.
Ma'am, do you want to take any more questions? Sir, I have a very layman question. If you do not get...
Yeah, because I think the time is over. Yeah, all right. Yeah, go ahead.
So please don't look at your watch
unless
you have another session after this.
Yeah, yes.
So once we've got you, we are not letting you go so easily. So there are several recommendations in my YouTube list stating the types of masks that we wear can prevent or can,
Yes, that was
does
my
it
question
matter?
too.
Does it matter? One, and also why does the virus not spread through shoes? Because, I've seen videos also, another layman's tool, where in Japan and China, they have these shoe covers before entering any place. So are those necessary?
Why you said that it's not? I said any surface. The shoe surface is also there. So it includes everything. Isn't
Okay.
it? Virus can land on everywhere. So those precautions, you know that putting the shoes outside the room or washing your clothes, all these things are actually being given by the health management system, announced by them. And we have to practice that.
And sir, about the masks, are they true? The material?
If you remember slides, I have already told you that how the mask is actually preventing the virus from transmission from one person to another because of this particular helping them to actually cut through this filtration unit and not to allow that to go.
So the material of the mask, does it matter, like cotton?
Yeah, that definitely matters, because the cotton mask can also be effective if you have a double layered, triple layered.
So just any mask, fashionable ones and stylish ones.
They are very effective. No, they are effective because
they're effective provided they have the layers.
They are multi-layered. Yeah, they are multi-layered. Yeah. Now the good masks are always Whether it's fashionable, not fashionable, all are multi-layered.
Okay. Any more questions, Indila? People are still entering, still joining the session.
So it's all right. It's okay.
So
We can
there is
close it.
another question from Orgo Dotto. It's what we were saying before the pandemic. He's brought it together. How is the regular hand washing and sanitization going to affect our water resources?
Definitely it will affect it, because we are now talking about saving the water, and instead of that we have to use water more. So how we are going to do so that is also another thing. It's a very important question, and I really like the question, but this is another concern we have to keep in our mind, that how to save the water also while washing your hands, but you have to wash.
I think that's all from here. Do we have any more questions from YouTube?
Thank you very much.
No, we don't have any questions. Madam Professor Bula Bhadro, would you like to conclude?
Ma'am, Professor Bhadro, you
have to unmute yourself.
No, I don't think. Ma'am,
it's all right. It's all right. You don't have to.
She's here. She's here. Just unmute yourself, ma'am.
Hello, ma'am. Yes, Professor Bhadro. Yes.
Unmute yourself. You are not. Please unmute yourself, ma'am. Yeah.
Okay. What do you want me to say?
I don't know.
Okay.
If you.
Okay. Professor Chattopadhyay, Vice Chancellor, sir, it was really informative. I have been attending actually Professor Chattopadhyay's session because I'm from the other spectrum, from social science, and scientists often think that we do not understand the details of it. So I've been attending his session so that I understand better, and he has been also giving me references. I've been reading on it. One thing I understood, though, which is positive, that Professor Chattopadhyay informs us very well. He's so informative. By listening to him, it's really sort of a plus point. So I spend my time whenever I hear that my friend, our Vice Chancellor, is speaking. The second point is not so positive, is that we are still not very sure about the scientist position as a whole, because different reports comes, and that confuses ordinary people like me, I would say, who does not have the basic sciences or other virologists knowledge, so that we are confused that which one to use, which one not to use. Like the one mask question. Mask was an enigma in the beginning period, which one to use and which one not. And then there was this question of sanitizer, how much percentage of alcohol, etc. Then the question of the soap. So all these things, probably Professor Chattopadhyay has to do a video, put it on there, so that people can hear it. People like Professor Chattopadhyay, so that ordinary things which are saying us to stay safe, that is would have been helpful. I cannot expect Professor Chattopadhyay to focus on the social problems we are actually facing every day, and almost like it is a psychological blockade now. But one thing we could probably ask our SNU and Professor Chattopadhyay to take a lead, and I would request that one actually as a sort of being part of SNU and also as part of being the academia, that we should reflect seriously on what could be our post-COVID pedagogy and educational mode in a country like India, how much online, offline we can do, and how much content changing we should go for that, so that we can give access to a lot of people, sometimes those who are not even part of our SNU, because that way our online potentialities will be much more effective. Like we have given SNU, from SNU we have given a Moodle, how to learn Moodle courses to others. So maybe Professor Chattopadhyay as the Vice Chancellor can give us leadership in terms of accessing online content by those who really cannot access, which is very important for India, I think.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, Professor Bhadro, and I really appreciate your reactions. And I can tell you that, yes, we are ready with our blended learning proposals and how to actually the post-COVID teaching pedagogy has to be changed. And for that, we are thinking about planning to do some sort of faculty development program to actually let the people know about, let not only our faculty members, but different faculty members can get an idea about it. Already, at least I have given lectures on this blended learning and the new teaching pedagogy to around 35 colleges, and there are another 20 colleges are in my line in the next 15 days. So I'm trying my best that whatever I understand to percolate that message to everybody. And yes, it is very important.
Thank you,
Thank
sir. So SNU will soon be pioneering the new normal, how to take academics forward.
Exactly. Exactly.
Thank you,
Yes.
sir. Thank you for your time. And from on behalf of all the participants, on behalf of my team, Oindila, Papia is there, Himadri is there, my tech support, my back-end hands. So they are also there. On behalf of all of them, let me thank you once again, sir. Namaskar.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Namaskar. Yeah. Okay.
We have to end the session.